All right, so as you well know, I am the wandering historian, and I'm actually here with another person I met via TikTok. Now, contrary to me, he is actually still active duty military, and he actually loves history almost as much as I do, but perhaps he likes certain aspects more than I do. We all have our weird quirks and kinks. We're historians. We're going to do that. Although you will generally find us hanging out in cemeteries for no good reason. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Major Kwame. Am I saying that correct?
Yes, Kwamu. Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
this is Major Anthony Kwamu. And he is currently, like I said, a major at Fort Leavenworth. Now, I can't discuss exactly in detail what he's doing there because I don't want to run the risk of any kind of security violation and having the MPs come after me again. I'm still wanted in two states. But we're going to talk a little bit about because I got in touch with him through TikTok about his experience as a true African American with Black History Month and kind of his history a little bit ago and how he came here and things of that nature. So, with that said, sir, thank you for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it. In case you haven't picked up on it, I'm at JBLM. He's at Fort Leavenworth. Beauty of Internet. But first, let's start off with your name and anything you want to say about that and your background, where you're from, and how you came and why you came to the United States.
All right, I'm Major Anthony Kwamu. Came to the US in the late 90s from Cameroon, actually, which is right there in West Africa, next to Nigeria.
Oh,
Came to
he's got a
the,
beautiful map behind him. Could you point out Cameroon for those of us
oh,
who
yeah,
are not
absolutely.
geographically
Yes.
inclined?
So this is Cameroon right here, right at the curve where Africa curves. If you point right there, that's Cameroon right there to the east of Nigeria.
So, for those who are less geographically inclined, thank you for having that map.
Oh, no worries at all. Yes. So I came to the US in 97, and why the United States? Because it was the easiest. Many of us who my generation, when we went to school, for many of us it was a matter of get after high school we wanted to go overseas. For some of us it was the adventure. For some of us it was looking for better um, educational opportunities. For people had different reasons. I came here for the education, and one thing led to another, and I'm still here about 20 something years later. And it was United States was a much easier path for me. I considered other countries, but getting to the US was the easier path for me.
Now, do you hold dual citizenship now, or is it solely American citizenship?
I did have dual citizenship, but when I joined the army to become a United States Army officer, because you are required to have secret clearance at the minimum and potentially top secret clearance, you're only required to have a single citizenship. So I had a choice, give up the Cameroonian, well, either way, I had to give up my Cameroonian citizenship pending my passport, and I had to provide evidence for that. The United States government will allow others to keep their previous citizenships and have dual citizenship, but the United States military won't allow that. So I had to turn in my Cameroonian passport.
Now, you when you left Cameroon, why did you want to leave Cameroon? Was it strictly for better education opportunities, or was it just, you know what, I want to do something completely different?
It was mainly for education, wanted to do something completely different as well, and it was for the adventure. I mean, it's no secret. Most people in the world want to come to America. That's no secret for different reasons. It's America. It's a land of immigrants. At least historically. And Cameroon at the time when I left in 1997 was in the midst of serious conflict, which has only gotten much, much worse now. So there are some things I can't get into right now that actually help nudge me towards leaving Cameroon.
So it has to, I'm sure that has to go back to colonial days when the European powers didn't really pay attention to where the traditional tribal boundaries were, rather just drawing arbitrary geographical lines.
Yes, some of that, yeah, some of that, like in many African countries, yeah, there are all those borders that are causing a lot of problems today in Africa. But my opinion for that is that yes, some of it goes back to blaming the Europeans, but I think that's just my opinion personally. Some of that comes back to some of the African countries themselves. There's a lot of things that the African countries themselves can do that we could have done in Africa. Um, you know, there's no one from Europe saying, hey, go fight, go split up, go start civil wars. Some of that are choices being made by some of the African groups for different reasons. But yes, some of those conflicts started because of the divisions that the European countries made. Some of it, to some extent, is because some of the African countries and different groups, for one reason or another, deciding to pick up arms to fight against the government, or sometimes the government is deciding to pick up arms to fight against certain segments of the population. In the case of Cameroon right now, it's been involved in somewhat of a brutal civil war for a while. And it goes back to the divisions between English and French Cameroon. So bottom line, Cameroon used to be a German colony. During World War I, it was invaded and seized by Britain and France. So it was kind of sort of jointly administered by Britain and France. There was also some union with Nigeria, but just to make a long story short, there are 10 provinces in Cameroon, or 10 regions. 8 were French ruled, 2 were British ruled. They came together to form a single country after independence, and Britain kind of made that union happen. But now those 2 regions are in conflict. Some people in the English-speaking region are wanting to secede from the rest of Cameroon, and that's causing a lot of conflict right now. Would I blame colonization for that? Yes, to an extent, but I think for the most part, the bulk of the blame goes to those who are actually picking up the guns and doing the fighting and doing the killings.
Now, just a fun question. Did you grow up speaking any other languages? Clearly English, but what other languages? Because you mentioned there was a long history of French, English, and German.
So I speak a little bit of French. I never grew up or lived in the French-speaking section, so my French is very, very, it's not the best French. So I avoid speaking as much as possible. So, but there's also a language usually. Yes,
so
sorry. Say again?
Le français, ils sont beaucoup?
Nah, my français est comme ci, comme ça. My français, c'est pas bon. Not at all. Yeah.
Mine's pretty rusty too, so.
Yeah, but there is a lingua franca the United States classifies as Creole, which is very common in many former British colonies, which is a mix of English and a whole bunch of local languages.
Yeah, it's common in the Louisiana area of the United States, some parts of Mississippi as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you came to the United States, I believe it was 1997, correct?
Correct.
So where was your first destination? I mean, did you get into the first school you went to? And how did you get into history? You mentioned in a previous conversation we had that you can't always had an inkling towards history, but how did you decide to make that a significant portion of your life?
So it was mainly a product of my environment. When I grew up in the 1980s, we did not even have, I mean, some people had TV sets, but there was no TV station. We did not have like TV like we do in the United States. TV only came to Cameroon in, I believe, 1986, 1980, or 1987, somewhere around there. And even so, it was only available for a few hours per day. And so for many of us, there was no Disney, there weren't that many picture books. So for me, at least, I found entertainment looking into history books and geography books, because that's where all the cool pictures were and all the cool stuff was, at least in my mind. Some of my friends were more inclined towards the math and sciences. I don't do well with numbers, so that didn't work out for me. So history was my thing, just because I like looking at all the various pictures. And from my brother, who at the time, maybe I was a lot younger than him, of course, and he was about 10 years old. And the conversations, my 10-year-old brother then, when I was young, I used to hear him have, him and his friends, they would be conversing about big political stuff, like, hey, who was a better politician, Margaret Thatcher or Ronald Reagan? Coming to think about it, I'm like, wow, for 10-year-olds back in the day, that was something remarkable. Or they'll discuss the various policies of World War II, what was going on, and I'll overhear them argue voraciously. And these are 10-year-old kids argue voraciously whether Britain alone could have defeated the Nazis without America's help, or whether if Japan didn't have to fight Russia enough, if they would have been able to take on America by themselves.
That is really interesting, because as a 10-year-old kid in the United States, in rural Washington State, those were not the conversations I was having.
No, yeah, and that's just because of the environment. Because in the United States, 10-year-old kids, they had Disney, there were different things they could there were different sources of entertainment for them. Back then, for us, there weren't that many. There were a lot of Newsweek magazines and Time magazines lying around, which you could look up. And of course, a lot of that had to do with history and news articles, which was fun. I'm not sure if that is the same case now in Cameroon. Now, of course, everybody has Disney, TV, iPads, iPhones, the internet everywhere. So I'm sure now they're exposed to a whole bunch of other sources of entertainment.
So, and I apologize for being distracted while you're talking there. I'm getting texts. I'm telling people to leave me alone. I'm trying to get this done. So, where did you get your degree from?
Georgia State University. So I do not have a master's degree. I'm sorry, I do not have a history degree. So my undergraduate degree is in filmmaking, and my master's degree is in education.
Well, but I did take a lot of history. Your TikToks are great, and so you have an advantage on us.
Thank you. Yeah. Now in Cameroon, I did study. I did 1 year of university in Cameroon where I majored in history and archaeology just for that year. And my dad wouldn't send me to America unless I decided to drop history and archaeology. He wouldn't send me to America to come study bones of dead animals, like he called them. He thought archaeology was something completely useless.
Well, so, I think Indiana Jones would have begged to differ with that.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said you kind of, in a previous conversation, you said you kind of accidentally found your way into the Army. You want to talk a little bit about that before we get into some deeper stuff?
Absolutely. So when I came to the United States, actually, I went to a military school. I was interested in the military, but of course, not being a citizen or even a holder of a green card, I could not actually join the military. But I went to Georgia Military College, which they accept students from all over the world because, unless you actually sign a contract to be in ROTC, you are in the cadet program just wearing uniform and drilling with them, but you are not doing like the intense military science classes. So I did go to a military school. I wore the uniform, drilled with them sometimes, although I was never an actual military candidate in the school. And then after that, I went to North Georgia College, which was also another military school, did some time. They never completed a degree there, but it was the same thing. Because I was not a citizen, I could not join the military or anything. But after that, I went to Georgia State University, got a degree in filmmaking, graduated, did not become the next Steven Spielberg like I thought I was. So I bounced around from odd job to odd job, lost interest in the military, took a job as a teacher eventually. I taught 6th and 7th grade literature, history, economics, geography. After about 6 years of doing that, it was kind of fun. Finally got my US citizenship. And the day of the citizenship ceremony, if you've ever been to a citizenship ceremony, there is a lot of flag waving and patriotism and all that. So I was feeling pretty good that day. And I'm walking in the mall that same day, and I see a recruiter. There's a flag next to him, and I'm just feeling good. I just got my citizenship, so I just went to talk to the guy. Just, hey, what's up? He was looking kind of lonely. And next thing I know, I'm on the bus to Fort Benning. Yeah, he was really good. He kind of talked me into it, and and eventually I decided to not renew my teaching contract and and go to the Army instead.
And you obviously got your commission at some point.
I went in as through OCS as an officer candidate.
Yeah. So now, not to diminish your military career at all, but some of the other issues I want to talk to you about was, and here's the big burning question: is Black History Month celebrated in Cameroon, or anywhere you were in Africa? Was it celebrated anywhere?
I'm not sure if there's anywhere I'll speak for Cameroon. I'm not sure about other countries because by default, most of the history we study is African history, which in a way by default is Black history. Now, we do study a lot of European history as well and world history. As a matter of fact, in my education in secondary school, we did do Cameroon history and what they call world affairs, which is world history. So world history encompasses African history, Europe, America, history of practically everywhere in the world, and of course, Cameroon history. As far as and of course, what is usually used here in America as Black history, a lot of times, which is slavery and the civil rights movement. So the slavery part will fall under African history. and the civil rights movement and all that would fall under world history as far as my curriculum in Cameroon was concerned in secondary school.
Now, how is Cameroon tied to the slave trade? Because what a lot of people don't realize is that a vast majority of slaves, that area you pointed out in Africa, they generally came from that whole kind of overall curve, not just that little portion where Cameroon is, but the whole kind of part of it. If I understand
Yes.
correctly, that a lot of tribes would capture people, sell them to the white Europeans, and then that'd be it. And these were also African tribes who were hired by white Europeans to capture slaves, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I actually did a TikTok about that. I went to a site in Cameroon. Cameroon was heavily involved in the slave trade, at least the coastal regions. So in that whole region, Bight of Biafra includes Cameroon, includes part of Nigeria. So there's a place that was recently discovered there. It's called the Bimbia Coast. And even today, it's a very, very remote area because the chief in that area, who was a local African chief, he did capture and sell a lot of slaves to the Europeans, especially to the Portuguese, all the way up to even even the 1860s, when slavery had been officially banned in a lot of places. And this place remained hidden for the most part because, of course, he had to hide it from his own people because he risked getting overthrown. Like many African rulers in that region got overthrown or were killed by their own people if it was discovered that they were involved in the slave trade. So this Bimbia Coast, the place remained hidden after the trade was ended. And only, I believe, about 10 to 15 years ago was it found again by accident. And I actually went and did a TikTok in that actual site. They are just developing the site now in order to make it an educational site for the public. Yes, but Cameroon was heavily involved. There are some British forts that are still in the area, some Portuguese forts in the area. And if you go there right now, you still see some cannon that were placed there. There was actually, just next to it itself, there was Lagos is not far from there. Lagos was actually bombed by British slavers because the chief in that region refused to partake in the slave trade. So his city was bombarded for days until he agreed to participate in the slave trade. Now, while for some chiefs like him, there were many like him who refused to participate, and then there were many like this one in Bimbia who did it willingly for the profit that he could make from it. But that region is a microcosm of like how the slave trade developed in Africa, And even in that place, you also had a few cases of Portuguese. The Portuguese slavers were notorious for actually landing and conducting raids themselves. Very briefly, they wouldn't go too far inland. And you did have some of that on the West African coast. So, and they were very notorious for doing that in East Africa too. So the reason why the Bight of Biafra, especially the section in Cameroon, is really it's really important. The study of slave trade, it encompasses all the aspects. It involves the Africans who willingly, 100%, were willing to capture and involve themselves in the slave trade and sell others.
But
It
let's
shows,
face it,
yeah.
after precious metals and gems.
Yeah, for trinkets, absolutely.
No, I
Then
mean,
you
but
also have like
when you think
Lagos.
about it, the things that are coming out of Africa at that time,
Yeah.
precious metals, gems, and humans. They
Yeah.
were what was bringing in the money, for lack of a better way to put it.
Absolutely. And then you also had those who were forced into it, like in Lagos, if they didn't participate in it, they got they were bombarded, and sometimes they were even captured and enslaved themselves by the Europeans. And then you had the few cases like the Portuguese, who were actually, for whatever reason, they are unique among the Europeans for having actually landed their personnel to actually
I
capture
think you
slaves
pointed out.
themselves.
I think you pointed out a major misconception that a lot of people I've spoken to about the slave trade is like they not every slave trading nation was running into the African continent
No.
and capturing people. A lot of it relied on, like what you said, trade. So thanks for that background. And now we're going to get into a little bit more deeper stuff. Since you've been here and when did you become aware of the Black History Month and its significance to the United States? Because Martin Luther King Day, Black History Month, they're actually not that old. Martin Luther King Day was established in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was established as a national holiday. Black
By
History
Reagan,
is more recent than that. So when you became aware of these lack of a better way saying holidays and celebratory months, How did that change your perspective of the culture? How did you change how you interacted or went about your daily life after you became aware of these?
I thought it was actually great. It's one of those things about America. So I thought it was great. I thought it was an amazing thing, with the US, trying to involve and incorporate everybody, as humanly possible, to make everybody feel um, belong. So you see, in America, a lot of times people are separated by race and ethnicity and all that. Where I come from in Cameroon, separation a lot of times is by class and by different tribes and ethnic groups. When I first learned about Black History Month and Martin Luther King Day and some of these steps that are being taken in the United States to try to involve everybody, first thing I thought, and this was in 1998, late after I'd been here for a few years, I said, wow, I wish we had some of this in Cameroon. I wish the government would try to establish programs to involve everybody, in every ethnic group instead of just focusing on some ethnic groups, as if they try to involve everyone, maybe this will um, alleviate some of the ethnic problems we have, not just in Cameroon, but throughout Africa, with wars every single day in some corner of Africa. And most of it is because of different ethnic rivalries, ethnic differences, with no one willing to compromise in a lot of those cases. I'm thinking a lot of those countries could learn from the US and take some of the good lessons, and work and see if they can improve on some of what is not working out well.
Today's sponsor is Kimages, a veteran-owned custom gift-making and photoshopping services. I can tell you from experience that Kimages is some of the best quality for custom gifts and photoshopping I've ever seen. Just take a look at this as I scroll through their Facebook page. You can see that your face can be in almost anything, movie poster, or even made into a three-dimensional doll. So for your next gift, retirement, or just a way to say thank you for your service, go to Kimages. Links for their Facebook page are in the description below.